So in this video, we're going to be reviewing special triangles. All right, we need to understand the way these are built, and we got two different ideas, right? We got the 45, 45, 90, and we have the 30, 60, 90. All right, these are the values that everybody memorizes. Okay, usually we use the calculator to solve trig problems, but for these special triangles, all right, we memorize them. So you're going to know the sine of 40 degrees. You're going to know the sine of 60 degrees by heart. These are things that we got to memorize. Okay, when we look at these special triangles, all right, we know they're right triangles, so we'll start off dealing with the first one. All right, number one, the 45, 45, 90. All right, 45, 45, 90 has a special name. Okay, we also call it the isosceles right triangle. All right, because it has two sides that are equal and two sides that are equal. Okay, so if that's x and that's x, then let's try to do some math to figure out what the hypotenuse would be. All right, the hypotenuse would be, all right, we got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. All right, the a and b will always be the sides that make the right angle. So if I go plug in x squared to these two places, and then I get c squared there, we got 2x squared equals c squared. Now we're still trying to find out an expression for the hypotenuse, and to get there, we only need one last step, the square root. So we get the square root of c squared is c, and on the left, we got 2 times x, right? So because we're looking at the side length of a triangle, right? C is the side length of a triangle, so it can't be a negative number. So that's why usually we would put a plus or minus here, but because we're doing geometry, we'll ignore the negative. And now we have two x's, so that means that an x will come out of the square root, and we'll have a 2 stay in by itself. So we have that c is equal to x root 2. So we just figured out is anytime we have an isosceles right triangle, all right, the hypotenuse is going to be the leg multiplied by the square root of 2. So this pattern is something that we want to learn so that we can work through these problems quickly. All right? So let's do a couple examples looking at some shapes up here. First idea we got is a 45-90. All right? And we'll do a couple of them next to each other so you guys can see the difference. All right? These problems might begin one of any ways, right? We might have a 7 here, or we might have a 7 root 2. And your job is to know that those two triangles are the same. All right? In an isosceles right triangle, the two sides that make the right angle are equal. Okay? So that would be 7 and 7. And right here we got 7 square root of 2. All right? In this case, we got 7 root 2. And I would take 7 and 7 here. So we got to understand is when I start with this number and I want to get the hypotenuse, that means I'll have to multiply by the square root of 2. But if I'm going backwards, if I start with the hypotenuse and I want to figure out what the leg would be, then I have to divide by the square root of 2. Okay? So we've been trying to study like what that really means to divide by the square root of 2. All right? What's it mean? Well, if we take any number, x, and divide it by the square root of 2, all right, there's something you guys are supposed to learn called rationalizing the denominator. Okay? We're not allowed to leave a square root on the bottom part of a fraction. We can't leave it in the denominator. We got to get rid of it from there. All right? So this is a pretty long phrase, and you guys got to understand how to do that. Okay? To rationalize the denominator, I got to multiply on top and bottom by the same square root that I'm trying to get rid of. So I'm trying to get rid of root 2. So I'm going to put 2 in these two places. All right. On the top right here, I got x times the square root of 2. And that will give me x root 2. Okay. But root 2 times root 2 just gives me 2. So, what's going on over here is that we got x over root 2 equals x root 2 over 2. These two things are the same. They look a little different, but you guys got to realize they're the same. Why are they the same? Well, what did we just multiply by, right? What's root 2 divided by root 2? It's just 1, right? And if you multiply something by 1, it doesn't change. So all we did is change the way it looks. You got me? Okay? We're not going to leave the square root on bottom. We got it over here. Okay? And if we could put this in words, we could think about, what did we just learn? Okay? What does it mean to divide by the square root of 2? Okay? Put this sentence down in your notes if you're taking notes right now. Okay? Dividing by the square root of 2, okay, can also mean to what? It means to multiply by the square root of 2, and then, well, I'll put that down here. And then after that, you got to divide by what? Divide by 2. Okay? So, dividing by root 2 means multiply by root 2, divide by 2. Okay? To multiply by the square root of 2, and then divide by 2 is the same thing as dividing by the square root of 2. So, we can see this right here symbolically, right? To take x and divide it by root 2 is the same thing as multiplying by root 2 and then dividing by 2. Okay? So this technique is going to help us solve these problems faster, but it is kind of a big idea, all right? But it'll be helping us on all of them. So now if we go look at number 2 here, what should we be thinking? Okay, in this case, I want to find the legs, and I've been given the hypotenuse. And so in this case, we know, am I multiplying? Am I dividing? What do I have to do to make it this way? All right? To turn the hypotenuse into the leg, I must be dividing by the square root of 2. Okay? So that means that this side is going to be 4 divided by the square root of 2. But as we saw earlier from looking at our little pattern that we found, okay, this is the same thing as 4 root 2 over 2. And because we can break this down a little bit, we got to divide it. Okay? 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the final answer would be 2 root 2. Okay, so now we're starting to get to the pattern that I showed you guys in class to make sure that we did these fast. Alright? I'm kind of showing you guys the long way. Let's take a look at number 3 and see how that looks. Alright, so on number 3, what you guys want to do the second you get to the problem is just darken the two sides that make a right angle and know those will be the same. So that's 3. The hypotenuse, well, to get the hypotenuse, I have to multiply by the square root of 2. So this will be 3 root 2. Alright. At some point, you guys are going to have to try on your own. Okay, so maybe this would be a good place to pause the video and try to see if you figured out the pattern. Alright, and if we go through and do our pattern, right, what do I have to do with the hypotenuse to make it into the leg? Alright, this would be dividing by root 2. Alright, so that means that I got to do 7 root 2 and divide it by root 2. So what's going to disappear? What's going to cancel out? The root 2's. And so we just get 7 and 7. Alright, so again, number 4 is done pretty quickly. Alright, these all happen really fast once you know what you're doing. Alright, for number 5, it looks a little funny, right? You know, these two that make a right angle got to be the same. So if that's root 2, this is root 2. Alright, you'll get a 50-50 if you at least can get me one of those numbers written down pretty quick. Alright, but now for the hypotenuse, what do I have to do to the leg to get the hypotenuse? I have to multiply by root 2. So that means I got to get root 2 times root 2, and that equals 2. Alright? So this problem is also complete. Alright, so like we said, we're just making a decision between do we have to multiply or divide, and you are going to have to remember the factor that we need in that case. Alright? So when we look at this one, what happens? I'm taking the hypotenuse and turning it into the leg. So what does that mean, right? This must be 10 divided by the square root of 2. Alright, and to divide by the square root of 2 means that I'm going to have 10 root 2 over 2. Okay, again, why am I getting that? Alright, I skipped the work because I want to show you guys how you should be able to just jump straight to that step, right? But rationalizing the denominator means I'm going to multiply on top and bottom by root 2. Okay, so I get 10 root 2 on top and on bottom, we just get 2. Now what's 10 divided by 2? Just 5. Okay, so I would get 5 root 2 for both of these values here. Alright, so there we go. This problem's done. Alright, so 7 would be a good one to pause and try on your own. See if you get the point. Alright, right here, the 2 legs should both be 2. Alright, that's got to be obvious to you guys by now. And then to turn the leg into the hypotenuse means I got to multiply by root 2. So that means this will be 2 times the square root of 2. Alright, so we got number 7 done also. Alright, so for number 8, in this case, you guys should see the 3 root 2, right? So what's going to happen? You guys should pause it, do it on your own. Alright, and hopefully you're back and you got the right answer. What you should do is divide by root 2. And so we should have 3 root 2. Oh, I wrote root 3. Alright, root 3 goes for the 30, 60, 90s. Alright, so we should have root 2. So 3 root 2 divided by root 2 makes just 3. Alright, so both of these sides will be 3. Alright, so that's done also. Now we'll go take a look at number 9. Okay, so now things get a little more hectic, right? So what happens? Alright, 9 root 2. If I want to take the leg and turn it into the hypotenuse, I have to multiply by the square root of 2. So in this case, we got a lot to write. Okay, we got to write 9 root 2 over 2, and then I got to multiply that by the square root of 2. So where should I put the square root of 2? Should it go on top, or should it go on bottom? Where does it go if I'm multiplying by the square root of 2? On bottom is if it's dividing, so on top is where it's multiplying. Alright, so that means we get 9, and then root 2 times root 2 is just 2. And because we have a 2 on top and bottom, we can cancel out the 2's. And so we know the hypotenuse is just 9. Alright, of course, these 2 should be the same, right? So you get the same number in both of those spots. Alright, so number 9 is complete. Alright, so now looking at number 10. Alright, you guys should try this one. And in fact, before we jump into this one, I'm actually going to just show you guys the whole pattern. So the pattern that I like to show my students, besides the whole dividing or multiplying by root 2 thing, is why these problems should go a lot faster. You guys should be able to tell just by looking at it, all right? Especially the 4590 is really simple. All right, there's not too much going on there. You got 2 angles that are the same. 2 numbers are the same, right? So let's do a problem like this. Let's say that we got 12 root 2, 12, and then 13. Alright? The pattern that I like to show you guys for these is that if there's a root 2 on the hypotenuse, right, then I know these 2 legs will not have the root 2. Alright? Now, when there is no root 2 on the hypotenuse, that means that I'm going to have to take half of that number, because I know I'm going to have to do 12 root 2 over 2. But because I know I'm going to have to divide this number by 2, half of 12 is 6. 6 root 2 is my final answer then, right? So if you see an even number with no root 2, then just take half of it and put the root 2 right next to it. Alright? So that pattern is something you can do quickly. But if the number is not even, then you just got to leave it over 2. Okay, so this covers the 45, 45, 90. I'm going to go ahead and call this video right here. Okay, but you should be able to tell which one of these pictures is going to help us for that problem we were just looking at. All right, let's go ahead and see what it is. All right, what should we be using? The one on the left, in the middle, or all the way on the right? okay? Because we got this 5 right here on the hypotenuse with no square root. So in this case, I'm hoping that you notice that we should be using this picture, okay? This one would help us with that pattern. All right, I'm going to get 5 root 2 over 2 for those. All right. So what I was thinking of doing for this assignment on here, the YouTube video, I might like attach a little PDF with extra practice and all the answers. That way you guys feel like you got that. So take a look in the comments or the little description. You might be able to catch a little link there. All right. Good luck though.